What?
MVP stands for what's a clever acronym that's not minimally viable product?
Using MVP?
Like monstrous velociraptor pooping.
Got it. You nailed it.
Nailed it. Okay.
Hi, welcome to the Nick and Jason Show. Today we're going to talk about MVP, or minimum viable product. Last time we talked about OKRs and kind of related.
Next time we're going to talk about ABCs.
No, we'll scratch that out. Anyway, and we mentioned that OKRs tended to be kind of, it was sometimes maybe a performance, that people were just doing it because OKRs happen to be trendy, regardless of what they actually meant. So they just slap a new label on their process and boom, it's OKRs. And I mentioned that MVP was a similarly, used label, and we were going to talk about that today. So Nikta, tell us your thoughts on MVP.
Well, in general, I will make a very brief point about business jargon here first, because I think that business jargon is such a brutal way of excluding people, of building a not shared understanding. You'll be in a meeting and people will be like, oh yeah, as part of our OKRs, we really need to deliver this MVP. So let's just circle back and touch base on the progress as part of this Scrum. Like, it's just like jargon. And I get that it's obviously a very efficient way of people communicating, but it also excludes people who might not be as experienced or as familiar with these topics. And furthermore, it can propagate a non-shared understanding. So those of you who know me, I like to talk about shared understanding all the time, where sometimes we talk to each other and it's like the ideas go like this, like we totally miss each other and we think that we're on the same page, but we're not. And developing a shared understanding is very difficult to do. So I think that MVP is a place where it's so important that you and your team get to a shared understanding of what an MVP would be. And my thoughts in general on an MVP is that it truly, the concept of it is correct and came from a good place of knowledge and learning. Was it the guy, is it Eric Ries from The Lean Startup, the book The Lean Startup? Is he the one who invented the concept of the MVP?
He probably came up with the name, but yeah, Lean Startup, I think, is where it came from, yeah.
Okay, cool. So having read the book, I feel like I have an appreciation for why this concept exists, right? You don't want to have a bunch of smart people hold themselves up in a garage and work on something heads down for 18 months only to release it into the market and discover that nobody cares. Nobody needs it, nobody uses it, nobody cares. Right. So the concept of an MVP at its core is a very good one, but I think that most people, and I am not an exception to this, it's really hard to determine what actually should make up your MVP. And so many things seem like they're absolutely important and maybe they're not. And some things seem like they're not important and maybe they are. So I don't know, it's a really hard balance to strike. But I think at its core, it's an idea that should continue to be embraced in tech, because especially in today's world, things move so fast. What the consumer wants today changes from what they want 6 months from now. So it's just so important to keep putting your stuff out there and getting feedback. Why? What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's kind of lost all meaning. And if you try to, you're right. You need to present it to your team and discuss it and okay, this is what I mean by MVP. And does everyone understand that? Okay, let's make one. Because if you don't do that and you just batter around MVP, it usually ends up meaning, let's just ship fast. Can we get this out without really doing all that due diligence or, thinking about it? They want the M, the minimum. What's the smallest amount of work we can do, period. And then ship it. And they often miss the V, the viable. And so you typically ship something, I don't know, you ship something that's not good. and won't ever be good because you didn't think it through enough. And there was a lot, and I found it to be used as a kind of a rhetorical thing from PMs to like, hey man, we're shipping an MVP. Let's get it out in the next month.
Yeah, it's
And
just a way of actually like delaying all of the hard stuff, right? It's just like, okay,
right,
don't do that right now. Let's just focus on the MVP.
right. And so yeah, and that just drove me crazy. I'm like, if we're gonna ship an MVP, do you know what the V stands for, guys? Viable. Is this viable? Is this like useful? And you just see everyone's faces go slack and like wait for me to stop talking. You're like, okay, so we can get this done in 6 weeks. Like they didn't want to kind of address that. And you basically have to repeat yourself over and over and over again saying, guys, this isn't viable. This isn't, and so I find that like, yeah, someone has to be there to call bullshit on what they think viable is, or like ask that hard question, like, will people use this?
Right.
Do people
And,
find this useful? And
and
like, what's the smallest thing that's useful?
yeah.
And if you have that, then and everyone focuses on that, regardless of how long it takes, then and often like, yeah, like what that looks like is probably going to go against everybody's instinct, right? And there's often this adage, if you're comfortable with what you're shipping, you're not shipping soon enough. And so you kind of really have to, like you said, really think hard about what viable means. But yeah, it's one of those terms of art that kind of gets me going because people use it incorrectly.
The point about like getting it out, I think, is such an important one because, and okay, what am I trying to say here? The thought that needs to be put into an MVP is not just, where do we draw the line of where the scope ends? The thought that needs to be put into it is, once we release it into the world, how are we going to know that we're on the right track? So that the whole point, right, is to get it out early so that you can make adjustments as you go. And if really you need to be heading in that direction, you start going there much sooner than if you were to wait to release 1 year from now, right? And so often, and I think, we were very guilty of this at the place that you and I used to work at, MVP was just like the shortest, like you were saying, it's just like the minimal amount of work that we need to do, and we do it and we never look back again. Maybe somebody somewhere pulls up a dashboard or looks at a metric and says, that thing that we delivered, increased conversion by 2%. Yay. And then nobody says, okay, so now what's next? Like this whole concept of iterative development, like it doesn't, because it's like people don't have the attention span somehow, whether it's management or executives or the actual people who are doing the work. It's like people lose interest in the project. They're not willing to do the short-term delivery, but with the big picture and the long-term in mind.
Right. And so, and yes, and that the culture was very much ship it, make sure it bumps the numbers in some case, and then do something else. Very like next shiny thing. And so if you have that and you're still discussing MVP, you really have to get the viable right, and you have to push, and you have to say, look, no, we're going to slow down. We're going to get it right the first time because we're not going to get a chance to go back and change it. And so I've had a couple of projects like that where, it was pretty ambitious, and there was this kind of MVP mindset, and we did ship an MVP, and we were fortunately allowed to kind of keep following up with it. But we did a lot of work. The team did a lot of work to convince the PMs to put in extra things, put in things that made it viable. And we did it. We did it before we shipped the first one because we knew we weren't going to get a second shot. So if it didn't do well, we weren't going to get a chance to improve it. And so we had to make sure it did well. And so you have to be aware of that. If that's what they're using MVP for, just to like ship it and then go somewhere else, then definitely do the work up front.
That's also a really big question, right? When it comes to like, where do you draw the scope line? It's like, well, did it not work because the whole concept is wrong and none of our customers actually want this product? Or did it not work because the concept is totally there, but the actual execution and what we ended up delivering was shit. So it's like, it's so hard to even assess, you know, what the data is actually telling you.
Yeah. Yeah. And right. And like you said, the last episode, it takes a couple years to fully understand this thing. Like a lot of these things take time, and you can't really, you know, in one sprint. If you're doing something in one sprint, it's probably not worth it. It's probably not useful.
I mean, that was a very strong
like,
statement. I mean, I've had people fix things in one sprint that like changes a customer's life because it was like a really annoying user experience thing that like now you turn something from 10 clicks into 2 clicks, and so now the customer's so happy, and it really wasn't that hard.
Okay, but that's less than an MVP. That's not killing of what. It's like a feature size. That's not product size.
I see. Right.
Anyway, MVP, call it out, everybody. Make sure everyone knows what it means to that team, and click subscribe.
What do we want them to tell us in the comments?
What's the piece of jargon that drives you batty?
Oh, that's a good one. Business jargon that drives you batty.
That frustrates you, and like, no, that's not what it means, or what have you.
Okay, there you have it, folks. Leave it in the comments. Smash that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.